Mo Markham is a climate and animal rights activist, an educator, and a writer from Kitchener-Waterloo, Ontario. She's one of the founding members of Eating Animals Causes Pandemics, Liberation Hour Radio, Fridays for Future Kitchener-Waterloo, and is the main organizer for the Kitchener-Waterloo Animal Save, Climate Save, and Vegfest groups. Mo believes in a one health approach. What's good for the animals is good for us human animals and for the planet we all share. Thank you so much for being here today, Mo.
Thanks so much for having me, Jenny.
Absolutely. I really was excited when I found the Eating Animals Causes Pandemics website, because that's really the piece that I think is missing from a lot of the media. So I want to talk a lot about that. But first of all, I love hearing about how people found the vegan path. What was that journey like for you?
Sure. For me, actually, it started out around climate. I had been vegetarian and pescatarian for 20 some years beforehand, but then I used to actually live in Vancouver, and I had come back and was living in the East for a number of years, and then I went back. Actually, it had been 7 years since I'd been out, and I went back out to visit for a few weeks and hadn't been to BC in about 7 years, and the change. I was really quite devastated by the change that I saw in British Columbia, and I tell people that I saw climate change, and that's what made me get active for the planet, and then through that, eventually for the animals as well. Um, I've been an activist most of my life, and was doing a bit of environmental work when I was in BC and women's issues, et cetera. But I was just quite stunned at the changes that I could see with my eyes. Just with my eyes. I don't have to read a paper. I don't have to read studies. I can see what we're doing to the planet. So that was the impetus for me.
And are you referring to the forest decimation from the bugs or?
I found, I think people who are living there don't see the change as quickly, but I used to be part of a camp on Vancouver Island, a women's camp, and so I was going for that as well. Driving across Vancouver Island, the color. This was in August, and everything was just yellow. It wasn't even brown. It was, the change was quite devastating. There were fires that were close to us. They were about 30 kilometers from us where we were on the island while I was there. There were days we're in this beautiful wilderness on a beautiful lake, and there were days that we had to stay inside because of the smoke.
Mm.
Um, we were not allowed to have fire, obviously. We watched them come with these massive buckets and, to dangling from planes to take to the fire. I came home using asthma inhalers that I hadn't used in years
Wow.
after that visit. Just even on the mainland, people weren't allowed to wash their cars or water their gardens, and just seeing, what all of that looked like. The bags around the trees, all of that hadn't been happening when I was in BC, when I was living in BC. So.
Mm. Yeah. Well, let's talk a bit about climate, because I think people are maybe starting to make the connection between climate change and the animal agriculture. What would you like to say about that connection?
Well, we need to make it, and we need to make it fast. What we're doing to the planet is quite devastating, and animal agriculture is a huge part of that, and that's what we talk about mainly with Kitchener-Waterloo Climate Save, and I try to bring that into the conversation in any climate group that I belong to and am part of, with Extinction Rebellion, with the Fridays for Future group here and in other cities, et cetera. And we have to talk about what animal agriculture is doing. The United Nations says that it's creating more greenhouse gas emissions than all transportation. So it's a huge part of the equation. We're cutting down trees to grow food for animals. We're cutting down trees to graze animals. We're losing trees. We're losing marshland. We're losing natural grasslands, and all of those things. Uh, all of those things sink carbon, and so when we lose them, we are losing. We're not only is the tree going to emit the carbon that it had sequestered already, but we're also losing the ability to sequester more carbon. So we're just doing stupid things. In so many ways, and from a water perspective and from a pollution perspective, all of those animals are eating food and drinking water every day. They're creating excrement and they're creating greenhouse gas emissions. So that's 70 billion farm animals on the planet to feed a population of just over 7.5 billion human animals. So it's not an equation that can work, and we have to. It's completely unsustainable. And in addition to that, and I know you're going to ask me about this as well, but I have to throw this in too. But in addition to that, what we're doing to the animals and the planet, both of those things are also affecting the number of pandemics and epidemics that we have, and that they are increasing because we are in closer because of we've destroyed so much habitat for wild animals and killed off so many wild animals. We're in closer contact with the animals who are there, and so because of that, we are more likely to, there's more likely to be spillover from the animals to, from the wild animals to the farmed animals and to humans of diseases and viruses. And we know that zoonotic diseases that come from other animals are increasing, right? And also, of course, the fact that we're keeping all of these animals in confined living spaces, they're not social distancing. We know that this is the way to prevent people, human animals, from getting the virus or from catching whatever diseases, is to social distance. And yet we're allowing this to continue. Where tens of thousands of animals sometimes are in one barn together, or thousands of animals, or even on a smaller farm. Any commercial farm is going to have hundreds or more likely thousands of animals who are being raised. They're going to be genetically similar, which means that they're more likely to have the disease, have a virus, run through the entire herd. And so, everything that we're doing right now with animals is completely unsustainable for the planet and for us as human animals, for our future in terms of pandemics as well.
Right.
So we're going to get off on a
So,
tangent.
and so, having lived on the West Coast, you are familiar then with the constant battle to protect the ancient forests that we go through here. It's perpetually, somebody finds the trees are marked, or if they find the plans for the logging, and the environmentalists are fantastic. They spring into action. They create camps. They block roads. They create tree sits. I've been a part of those for decades. It's this perpetual cycle. And it occurred to me recently, we know that the Brazilian rainforest has mostly been destroyed for animals, for animal agriculture, and to grow food, to feed those 70 billion animals that you talk about. Now I really feel like on Vancouver Island and perhaps some of the other smaller islands, we know that Salt Spring's very famous for lamb and sheep. That's kind of their thing. And I feel like there's this real commitment to locavore here. As living on an island, we feel the need to produce our own food so that we're not dependent on traffic that may or may not happen as climate change gets worse. There may be, problems with bringing food here. And it concerns me now that these forests are being cleared and the environmentalists are, doing everything they can, but as long as we continue to consume even local animal foods, what's going to happen the day that we realize, oh my gosh, we're eating animals from lands that were grazing on lands that were previously ancient forests we were trying to protect. And I'm not getting a lot of traction from this. I just kind of put it out there in the social media world, and nobody's really going, "Oh yeah, that makes sense." Like, what do you think of that? Am I just out in left field with that one?
Well, I was part of some of those protests when I was living in British Columbia as well on the mainland. Um, and I think that there isn't enough attention paid to any of it. For any reason, cutting down old growth forest doesn't make any sense. And, cutting down forests, period, in this day and age is a criminal act as far as I'm concerned. And, um, and, you know, it doesn't matter if these particular trees are being cut down to put in a new road or to, um, or to sell off, for lumber, et cetera. We're losing trees, and every single tree that we lose is, a nail in our coffin, really. It's a wooden nail, but it's a nail nonetheless. And when we're losing trees for any and every reason, we have to think about the whole picture, and the whole picture. And you're right, anytime we're eating animals, we're eating animals who were raised on land that was once forest, or and is not being, trees are not being replaced, or natural grasslands or marshes are not being replaced because that land is now being used for raising animals or raising crops to feed those animals. So in everything that we do right now is we have to think of the big picture, and we have to think about, where are we going? And, and beyond, just beyond us, we really need to think about the kids who are here today. And, we're not going to turn this around. We have made this massive mess, but the kids who are here today deserve to grow up and reach old age, and that isn't going to happen if we don't make massive and unprecedented change, like the International Panel on Climate Change to the United Nations, the IPCC report has said over and over again, we need to make massive and unprecedented change. We're not doing that. We're not doing that, and it's heartbreaking. And everything that we do, every part of what we do, has to have that in mind, I think.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree that going vegan is a massive change?
I don't think it's a massive change, but we need a massive amount of people to go vegan. I don't think it's a big change. People think that it is, but once they actually start doing it, they'll understand fairly quickly. I think most people, that it isn't a huge change. It's a huge change in mindset to begin with, but it's not actually a huge change in what people are doing, and how they're living their lives. Um, it's pretty straightforward. And there's so much help online. There's so many mentoring programs to help people to do that. I don't think it's a big change in and of itself, but we need to, we need activists, we need people, understanding the issue, environmentalists, animal rights activists, whoever. We need people to look at the whole picture. And this is Joni.
Hi, Joni.
um, we need to look at the whole picture, and to be aware of, um, sorry, I've lost my train of thought. Joni's not helping me here.
That's okay. So as an individual, yeah, it can feel like a massive change, but collectively, as we move vegan as a population, do you think that can initiate this massive change that we
It,
need? That
it has to. We cannot make the change that we need to make in anything like time to make significant change for the planet and for us as a species, if we don't, most of us, go vegan. And so, and I think what I started to say earlier was, it isn't just one individual going vegan right now. At this stage, what we need is lots of activists out there convincing people and helping them to understand why we need to go vegan and how important that is to our future, from a pandemic standpoint, from a climate standpoint, and even, from our own health, for our own health.
For our own health, for the animals, and even there's a
Yeah,
feminist
humans, of
element
course.
to it as well, right?
Sorry, there's a
A feminist aspect to it.
oh, absolutely. I mean, we don't want to think about it, and we don't want to think about it, but the whole idea of what we do to female bodies in the animal agriculture industry is quite obscene, right? We're interfering with animals sexually, and people say, oh, it's nothing to do with um, it's not sexual. But if it was your body, you would feel like that. You would allow people to do the same thing to your cats or your dogs that they do to animals in the in the animal agriculture industry, and yet, as females on this earth, we're not thinking about what's happening to these other animals. Being forcibly impregnated, having their babies taken away, having their breasts, handled constantly. All of it it is a feminist issue, and it is an issue that we don't want to think about as women. But I think we need to.
We need to. And somebody pointed out to me recently that also that it's babies. Usually it's the babies that are suffering the
Oh
most.
yeah, yeah. People, my cats are all vegan. I have 5 vegan cats, and people, flip out on you about that. And it's perfectly possible to have vegan cats now because because the developments around it, and that's a whole other show, I know. But my cats are all I rescued a pregnant mama, so my cats are all around 4 years old, and that's more than 3 years, more than any farm animal lives, unless they're being used to produce more animals, right?
Mm,
So,
yeah.
and sorry, and that's who's making noise at the moment, and I
But yeah,
apologize.
animals are very welcome on plant powered radio.
Awesome.
No, no problem. And all right, and so you've done a lot of activism with the Save movements as well, and organized Vegfest. Let's move over now, though, to talk about eating animals causes pandemics. So this is a fantastic website. How was this your idea? How did this thing come about?
Well, actually, Direct Action Everywhere had started doing some activism around the issue a while back, um, in I think September last year, and they did kind of a world or a Canada-wide event to raise awareness about it. And KW Animal Save was part of that event. But afterwards, some of us got talking about it, and we wanted to, talk about it more, make it bigger, and help people to understand the science around it. From my perspective, it isn't an animal rights issue. It's an issue, a scientific issue um, around what we're doing and the effect that it's having. So we wanted to approach it from a scientific perspective. And so some of us got together and started talking about that. Created the website. Jenny Donovan, who is one of our members from Montreal, and was part of organizing the initial DXE um, actions, as well is our website genius, and she has put together most of that. She's done a fabulous job, and uh, and we also have a Facebook page. And I think, as you know, we're planning. So we actually got together with a group in the United States and started talking about doing a worldwide event. And so that will be happening on May 1st. Um, I don't know if I can name all of the cities for you, but we have cities um, in Australia, Zambia, Germany, Turkey, Canada, the United States, the United Kingdom, um, other Switzerland, I think, and Sweden. Um, so we have cities all over the world who will be joining us, and we're always happy for more, to come on board. And we wanted to get this going soon because we know that, once people are vaccinated, the whole issue is going to, amnesia will set in, right? Once people are vaccinated, and our lives go back to what we thought was normal before, but we can't really afford. People are going to forget about what actually has been going on for the last year, more than a year, and how our lives have changed and been turned upside down, and how people's businesses and lives have been destroyed, how millions of people have died. We're going to forget about this, and so we want to kind of strike now, and on as big a scale as we can, and force people to think about this, force the media to cover it. We're hoping for media coverage because it is a worldwide event, and to get governments talking about it and thinking about it.
I'm not convinced things are going to go back to normal, Mo. Personally, I think this is the ultimate karma, that until we create a mostly vegan world and leave these animals alone, this is just our energy coming back at us. I'm concerned, like some of the variants are not necessarily responsive to the vaccine. We don't know the long-term consequences of the vaccine, and your website, our media has done a terrible job, I feel like they're really good at covering the numbers and where the outbreaks are as far as we know, and this
Yeah.
and that and the vaccine, but they don't talk about the virus, the source of the virus. But when I went to your website, there's articles there from India and Russia and all over the world that's that are talking about avian flu outbreaks and chicken outbreak of a virus in Russia, and there's apparently now the COVID is in the wild mink populations, and that it could be
Right.
spread to other mammals. So I mean, the vaccine, that's, let's hope it helps, I guess, because a lot of animals have been tested, have given their lives, or have their lives have been taken for this
Mhm.
vaccine. But I don't see a world beyond this until we get to that vegan place.
I don't think that we're finished with it. If we do go back to normal, if we are able to go back to normal and things, calm down in terms of COVID, I, I don't know, but I think that's where people want to go. But one of the reasons that we want to strike now and make sure that people start thinking about, not just this pandemic, but all of the other pandemics and epidemics that we've had in the last 100 years. And we know that they're increasing. The World Health Organization says they're increasing. The Centers for Disease Control, scientists across the world are telling us that they're increasing, that, their incidences are increasing. So, you know, even if we get past this one, we are going to have more. They've been predicting, scientists have been predicting for years that we're going to have a massive worldwide pandemic if we don't make change to what we're doing, right? And we haven't been listening. Governments have not been listening. The media has not been talking about this. And, here we are. And, everything that I've read about it suggests that regardless of how horrendous we think this pandemic has been, the next one may well be bigger. And there is, everything that I've read also suggests that it's likely to be an avian flu or a swine flu. So it will come to us from the animals who we, eat as more than others, chickens, ducks, turkeys, and pigs.
Hmm. So it's fantastic that you guys are organizing this. I thank you so much for doing that. I haven't heard of anything locally in Victoria. I'm hoping that something's going on. But what kind of things are you sort of leaving it to the other cities to figure out what they want to do, or is there a collective thing that's happening?
Yeah, so we've invited people, and we've sent out, fairly specifically what we would like people to do, but we also have alternative actions because many of us, like here in Ontario, are on lockdown again because of the variants. And so what we've done in previous actions, and we're trying to do again this time, is ask people to wear biohazard suits, which they're really just painting suits. That mostly what we've used is just painting suits from hardware stores, and surgical masks and gloves, depending on the time of year. The surgical gloves, and we have specific signs that we're giving that we're giving people the files to, so that they can have them printed, even just on paper and stuck to another sign or a piece of cardboard. And we have a voiceover, talking about, with a siren behind it, talking about, the emergency that we're in, and how our governments and media are not paying attention, et cetera. So we're trying to get all of that out to people. Some of us here in Ontario will be doing actions by just stuffing dummies and setting them up with the signs to try and get media attention, because every time we've planned something like this, in December we did a cross Canada action, but every time we've planned something like this, we've ended up with different people in different areas needing to cancel because of lockdown. And that's true in other countries that we're talking to as well. I think India is going into a lockdown right now, and so I'm not sure what actions they'll do. But so we're trying to talk to people about alternative actions that they can do right now, and we have some other suggestions in the information that we're sending out to people as well. The folks in there's folks in about, I think, 8 cities in Mexico, and some Mexican activists in 3 other cities in outside of Mexico will be putting together a video and releasing it on May 1st as well. That will be their action. And yeah, so just, we're getting the word out is basically what we want people to do. But for people who are able to do some street activism right now, we do have a specific ask if they're able to do it.
Okay, cool. And so May 1st is traditionally International Workers' Day. And so is there there definitely is a connection between the virus and workers. Are we
Absolutely.
emphasizing that?
But in fact, when we set it up, Janine, we had set it up because that week is, I think it's International Vaccination Week.
Oh.
Or something along those lines. I apologize, I can't think of the exact name of it, but it's something like that, International Vaccination Week. And so we wanted to tie it into, the fact that vaccines are not going to save us from the next pandemic, right?
Right.
And just on the subject of vaccines, we have, in even when the media and these governmental organizations do talk about the link between pandemics and animal agriculture, they talk as if we can vaccinate all of these animals, right? And how can we vaccinate? We don't even know what the next spillover is going to be, right? So we're having these spillovers from wild animals, and we have no idea what virus is going to spill over next, right? So how could we vaccinate them? The only real way that we can vaccinate them, that we can stop this, is to stop raising animals for food. And and that isn't talked about enough. And so that's why we're here, is to talk about that.
And clothing and all the other ways we
Oh,
exploit them.
absolutely. The mink, of course, the mink industry is a problem. And as I'm sure you know, there have been a couple of farms in British Columbia that have had COVID-19 outbreaks among the mink. And of course, in Europe, the minks contracted COVID, but they also passed it back with a new mutation, right? So raising, anytime that we're warehousing animals, it's a bad idea. Wet markets. We want to think it's all about the wet markets. It's all about bringing all of these genetically similar animals together, and and it's just a recipe for a disaster, right? I think it's Dr. Greger talks about, this is how we create a pandemic, right?
Yeah, we've done a very good job of it. And in fact, we're so used to the idea of vaccination that we have an annual flu vaccination. And the flu is also a zoonotic disease. It originally came from, I think, chickens, was it?
Yeah, I think so. It's been a while. Yep, smallpox, measles. We don't think about them as zoonotic diseases, but they were. They came to us from our use of other animals and our exploitation of other animals, and we can't continue to do that. In and The Spanish flu is another pandemic that we don't think about as a zoonotic disease. It actually isn't. It wasn't from Spain. Most of the recent studies suggest that it originated on a farm in the United States, Kansas. It's thought to be Kansas from a farm in Kansas, and it's likely it was an avian flu to begin with, came from wild birds, and was transmitted through pigs. So it is a swine flu, I believe. It's the H1N1 virus is considered a swine flu. I'm not an expert on any of this, but that killed more than 50 million people across the world,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
50 million people, and still we didn't learn our lesson, right? I mean, back then they didn't really know where it came from, but now we know, you know, and now we know where Ebola came from. We know where SARS came from. We know where MERS came from. The avian flu, the swine flu, mad cow disease, all of these, are zoonotic diseases that we know the source of them now, right? And we know that it's our exploitation of animals that brought them to us. So we have no excuse anymore.
We have no excuse. We have alternatives for everything that you could possibly need in this world. We have online access to scientific data that can confirm these things that we're saying. Vegan friend of mine who said that it comes down to taste buds, that we're so controlled by our taste buds that we're familiar with these things. They bring us comfort. And I mean, I don't want to say, oh yeah, I used to live on this planet where people's taste buds, allowed everything to be destroyed. And that's really what it is. It's just habit, it's addiction, and there really is no excuse. We have all the information we need. People are very resistant. Even the most activist, intelligent people that I know are so resistant to find this information, and they're really depending on the vaccine and the idea that, oh, they can get their vaccine and then they can go out to their favorite restaurant and eat some kind of animals. It's
Yeah.
very disheartening.
And it's tradition, and I have to say, as humans, we forget the fact that we're animals most of the time, and I think animals, as animals, we react to you know immediate threats, right? It's a fight or flight issue, right? And the threat of climate breakdown, and the threat of the next pandemic, those things are far away and they're not immediate threats, and so it's difficult for us to take them seriously and to act on them, right? But we also go on and on about how much more intelligent we are than other animals. If we're more intelligent than other animals, then we need to do what we can to not destroy ourselves, and to think with our heads rather than simply continue to do what we have done for many years, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, and let's talk a little bit about these workers, since it is International Workers' Day coming up with, and the day of action for eating animals causes pandemics. Who are these people working in the slaughterhouses? You've done work with Animal Save, so you've been to the slaughterhouses watching the non-human animals going in. Have you made contact with any of the human animals that are in these places?
I have talked to some of them, yes, and even just walking by the parking lots and such, you hear a lot of other languages spoken. I think many of them are immigrants. And the longest conversation I had with any of them was with a man on the subway when I was in Toronto one time. I woke him up because I thought because he had fallen asleep and he was going to miss his stop. And so, and I had a long conversation with him because it turned out not to be his stop for a while yet. And he was an immigrant, and had this was the first job that he had gotten when he came to Canada. He didn't feel like he had other choices, and realistically, I think that that's true for. But he also, he would see the protesters outside the slaughterhouse, and he didn't think that they were wrong. He just didn't know what else to do,
Mm.
for himself, right? And um, and you know, when we, I think when COVID hit and there were so many outbreaks in the slaughterhouses um, in all over the country, but I think Alberta, the High River, I think it was the Cargill plant in High River. That was the worst outbreak. One of the worst outbreaks in North America was at that slaughterhouse plant. And um, you know, the the people who were working there didn't want to go back to work. Some of them died because they went back to work, but because they didn't feel like they had a choice. And our government didn't do anything about that. Our government allowed this to go on. And in the United States, Donald Trump decided that meat was an essential service, and actually forbade them from the slaughterhouses from closing down, even if they had outbreaks. Workers were getting encouraged, were getting bonuses for showing up to work, which you only got if you showed up for work, and if you were sick and you need the money, you might just show up anyway because you're afraid to be without the money. And most Canadians aren't in the same position as someone who is here um, as an immigrant. Most Canadians simply take for granted the fact that, well, if you don't have this job, you can get another one. And that isn't true for everyone, and we need to think about that. And not even just the immigrants who are working in slaughterhouses, also immigrants who are working in other farms, on sorry, and vegetable farms and fruit farms, et cetera. They're also treated badly. There were many outbreaks among those workers as well, because because we think that it's okay to treat others differently from ourselves, and because they are immigrants, many of them immigrants or seasonal workers who have been coming to Canada every year to work in fields and to get food for the rest of us here. They still don't have the right to become Canadian citizens or apply for landed immigrant status or any of that. So it's treating animals and treating people as us and them, and not as equals, that has gotten us into this mess, and will continue to have horrible repercussions for all of us going forward if we don't make change.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big changes that you mentioned. The way we think about where our food comes from. We just don't appreciate at all where food comes from, I think. And just the amount of time. I have a small balcony garden, and I can sometimes grow things like potatoes. And it's really changed the way I look at food. Like, the amount of time it takes to prepare the soil and plant the potato and wait for the potato, and then it's gone within like 5 minutes. It's in my belly, and that's it.
Mhm.
I think we don't tend to think about those sorts of things. Okay, what about the connection then between governments and media and these big industries? A friend of mine has suggested that another reason we're not going to really get beyond this is because now there's the pharmaceutical corporations have a landslide now with this vaccine. It's going to become a necessity. It's probably going to become an annual thing like the flu shot. And so, why would they want us to cure ourselves and be healthy? And what's the connection between governments and media and big business that we should know about, Mo?
Well, again, I'm not an expert on that either, but certainly I think big business, giving money to governments, giving money to people running for office is a massive problem. And the whole idea of conflict of interest, we simply haven't um, uh, we simply haven't uh, taken hold of that. You know we think about conflict of interest, but we don't really apply it where most of our government officials are concerned. And Yeah, that's going to take us down for sure. And I think capitalism generally is taking us down. Even if even if from a philosophical standpoint, you think it makes sense. If you realistically, if you look at what it's done to the planet, it's brought us. Sorry about that. It's brought us to this place, right? We think that our gross national product needs to keep increasing, and what we really need is uh, not economic growth, but we need degrowth. We need to go back to the basics. We need to stop spending money. We need to stop creating things because we don't need more things. What we need is a planet that's livable, right? So all of that stuff is problematic, and the media is a corporation. It's made up of corporations, right? I heard from somebody years ago, and I can't remember if it was Australia or New Zealand, but only a certain amount of media was allowed to be owned by the same person or corporation or whatever, and that made total sense to me. But here in Canada, and I believe it's the same in many other countries, these corporations just buy up more and more media, and so they control what we hear. They control, the information that we get about what's happening in the world.
And the advertising, right, is shaped for consumer purchases, and the amount of animal advertising is just astounding. Plus,
Mhm.
I think we're subsidizing. There's not only big ag is or yeah animal agriculture giving money to politicians, but then they get subsidies, right, for their industry as well. So
Right, and
yeah,
and you're probably familiar with Nation Rising that is trying to stop those subsidies, get the government to actually subsidize the transition that we need to have from animal farming to plant-based farming. So,
right.
um, and you know, and just more announcements. I think today actually there was another announcement that more money going uh, to poultry farmers. I hate that word, but you
Mm,
know, and in the midst of a pandemic that was created because of our dependence on animal and on animal agriculture and eating animals and exploiting animals, we're giving more money. We're bailing these corporations out instead of well, they call themselves farmers, but most of them are corporations. We're bailing them out instead of transitioning, which is what we need to do if we're going to stop doing this over and over again, and if we're
right.
if we're going to have a future from a climate perspective as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit insanity for sure. There is talk at the federal level for a universal basic income. And I remember when I spoke with Dr. Salish Rao from the Vegan World 2026 project, and he said the most important thing is that we get a universal basic income, because then he said nobody's going to work in the slaughterhouses. That then everybody will just have to be vegan, right?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we're almost out of time, but before we go, what about the ag gag legislation? I'm not sure people really understand how serious this is. These laws that are being put into place, there's a federal bill that the NDP have voted unanimously in favor of. Apparently, Lana Topham in British Columbia, the Minister of Agriculture, is writing a BC-based bill. You guys have a bill in Ontario. I think there's one in
Ontario does,
Alberta,
Alberta does.
and
Yeah.
the one for Manitoba is coming up. Like, what is all that about, and what should we know about that?
Well, it's essentially, the industry is feeling threatened, I think, by activists, and we actually saw there's a farmers newsletter that someone shared with us that basically they're concerned that we're starting to make the connection between eating animals and pandemics, right? So basically, when they feel threatened, then they push the government to create legislation to protect them, and call it, they call it in Ontario. I can't remember the full name of the bill, but basically they're suggesting that it's a biosecurity act, right? And it's exactly the opposite, right? So these farms exist in isolation, and they get away with the filth and the filthy conditions that the animals are living in because no one is seeing what's happening, right? I'll just give you an example, actually, not too far from here, Guelph. Just outside of Guelph, there was a fur farm, mink farm, called Millbank Fur Farm, that was facing, I think, 14 charges of animal cruelty, failure to provide adequate medical attention, unsanitary conditions, etc. And this was I can't remember the name of the group that exposed them, but it was an American group that had an undercover operation going. And it's a couple. This whole thing was a couple of years old. Well, the guy pleaded guilty just a couple of weeks ago to this. And but right now, if this was to happen right now with this ag bill in effect in Ontario right now, this group is unlikely to have been able to go in. And if they did, uh, uh, they would be facing fines of $15,000 to $25,000 for going in and exposing these conditions. And I mean, if you think about it, right now, mink are a massive threat to us because they can get COVID and pass it back to us with mutations. And yet, one of the things that this mink farmer, was charged with was unsanitary conditions. And so, but no one is looking at mink farms because they're not food related. So they're not, I mean, most animal agriculture farms are not inspected anyway, but mink farms, the last time mink farms was inspected was many years ago, right? Because they're not producing food, so they're not considered. So how sanitary the place is not considered to be an issue, but clearly it is an issue for us right now, and we're starting to understand that connection between the filth in these places and what's happening with us in terms of pandemics. So all of these things are connected, right? But I think if people actually knew what was happening on these farms and how disgusting they looked, they would never want to eat animals again, right? And so when we expose the truth, that threatens the industry, and the industry is fighting back, and they're fighting back through government channels because it's a huge lobby, right? So they have a lot of money, and they're using that money to influence the government, to silence activists. But I think what it is it's a sign that we're having some effect, but we need to continue, and we need to continue to fight, and not back down, because our entire future as a species is at risk.
It is. All right, so people listening maybe want to get involved with the May 1st action then. Where should they go? And is there anything else that you want to say before we leave?
Sure. Thank you very much, Janine. Thanks for having me. They can go to our Facebook page, which is simply Eating Animals Causes Pandemics. They can also look at our website, of course, which is eatinganimalscausespandemics.com. But on our Facebook page, they can message us, and they can also email us at eatinganimalscausespandemics@gmail.com.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mo. Appreciate all your work.
Thank you. Appreciate your having me speak, and thank you for your work, Janine.
Absolutely.